All right, we're going to begin this proceeding this morning. It is State of Florida versus Devon Arthurs, and we were set for a trial this morning that was going to last all week. However, I have been advised that Mr. Arthurs has reached a plea agreement with the state of Florida, and so we have now converted this morning to a plea acceptance and sentencing.
In May of 2023, Devon Arthurs, now 24 years old, walks into a Tampa courtroom in a jumpsuit and in shackles, and he sits down next to his defense attorneys. It's more than 6 years after he pulls a trigger and kills his two roommates, Jeremy Himmelman and Andrew Onishuk. Devon Arthurs looks a little different here than he did that day. In the mugshot from the day of the murders, he's very, very young, and he's very angry. Now, 6 years later, he's grown bigger and older, and he's about to address the court.
All right, Ms. Dunker, you had indicated earlier that you believed that Mr. Arthurs wanted to be heard at the end. Is that correct?
He did. He's expressed that to me multiple times. He's prepared to make the statement to the court.
All right, you can use that microphone in front of you, Mr. Arthurs. We'll make sure it's on, and you can make your statement at this time.
During interviews with police after his initial arrest, Devon talks about the worldview he develops as a kid. We go into that in previous episodes. When he stands to speak to the court during his plea hearing, he doesn't speak about the coming war for a white ethno-state. He makes no mention of Adam-Waffen division and its disdain for anything that isn't white or male.
I think what occurred was a tragedy. I think that it's tragic that 2 people lost their lives and 3 people were terrorized and stuff. I feel awful about everything that happened. I want to dedicate the rest of my life to trying to better myself and trying to make the right choices. I feel that I can be an advocate against extremism, and I'd like to take this moment to tell the world to stay away from extremist groups and tell that I want to try to dedicate my life to getting people away from militant movements and stuff like that.
It's natural to be skeptical about what Devon says, because yes, there's something about it that just isn't convincing.
I have experiences of drugs as well and mental illness, and I want to try to dedicate my life to trying to help people out with both of these things. I feel the utmost empathy, and I think of the Onishchuks and the Himmelmans every single day. I think of the people in the smoke shop every single day. During the incident, I was 18 years old. I was brainwashed by militant movements growing up and stuff like that. I didn't know or think that this is going to cause ramifications like this. And, I don't take it lightly at all. I think that it's tragic for everybody involved and stuff like that. And I feel like I can try to better myself and make myself a better human being and make the lives of those around me better as well. And I hope that I can do things with my life even when I'm free and dedicating my life against extremism and hate groups and many things like that. I feel like I can honor the memory of Andrew and Jeremy by being a better human being, and I can make the right choices. And I feel like I could be a better man and be a better son and be a better American and better human being. I've let my family down, I've let myself down, I've let my country down, and I think about that every single day.
Okay, fine, I'll say it. Devon still isn't getting it here. Letting someone down is when you spill a secret or don't hold up your end of a bargain. Devon, with his mind polluted and infused with searing hate and anger, killed 2 people. And then, during all of this, he even starts a list of thank yous.
I want to thank my defense team for everything they've done for me and how much they showed the compassion to me and helping me show a better way in life. I would like to thank all the other people in my life that have done the same thing, my family, the people that I've encountered in jail, both deputy and inmates that have taught me, being a peaceful person is a proper way for my religion, and trying to be a better man and be a better human being and stuff. So I'll leave it at that, but overall I'm sorry, and I'm going to try to better myself and try to make the world a better place.
Towards the end of the hearing, there's an opportunity for families of the victims to speak to Devon, to give him some idea of what all of this has done to them. So Jeremy's sister takes the opportunity.
There's obviously some mental illness going on. Nobody chooses that. And I don't know what happened in your life. I don't know what happened for you to get to the place that you did. And I hope that you heal from it. I really do. And I don't hate you. And I really just want to say that I don't hate you. I feel sad that your whole life is going to be in prison. I feel sad that there's no alternative to the prison system, that you can go and heal whatever happened to you that brought you to this point.
What brings Devon to this point is what we illustrate in the last few episodes of this series. There's a childhood of instability, a family life that Devon at some point decides he wants no part of.
My main ties to this organization is I was a part of it out of necessity. I needed a place to stay away from my family. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I should have lived with them. I was just trying to get out of the house and stuff like that.
And of course, there's the gravitational pull of an older, influential neo-Nazi thought leader.
Were you with Brandon when he created this?
I was not with Brandon.
Did you meet him through this? When he created it, did you meet him through...
I met him through the Tiny Chat, but that's just like I said, YouTube. It's a huge channel.
But did you meet him with this common interest?
Yeah, which was specifically neo-Nazism, and I remember.
Okay, so and that's how it kind of sparked your conversation with him.
Yeah.
Had he already created Adam Buff at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it was very small at the time and stuff like that, and as the years went on, just kept on getting bigger and bigger, and more, people came on board with more and more radical views.
Being prone to radicalization isn't one size fits all. There's home life, relationships, emotion, and a lot of cases have their own unique set of circumstances. Devon has, in his own words, described being sick and needing help. So the question becomes, just how sick is he?
Have you ever been diagnosed with any kind of mental illness or anything like that that might prevent you from having a conversation where you understand what I'm saying or understand what you're saying?
No, I don't. I've never been prescribed with that, but I wish I went to a hospital before this.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad. But a select few step outside all of society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is Deviant, Homicide, Hate, and American Extremism, Part 3. Welcome back to Deviant. I'm Andrew Iden. When Devon Arthurs is arrested for murder in May of 2017, this isn't as simple as arrest, trial, verdict, prison, because Devon's case takes a long and winding path through the courts, because at the center of all of this, for a long time, is his mental fitness. He talks about that right after his arrest with Tampa Police Detective Kenneth Neitlinger.
I wish I had listened to my family and just I wish I had followed what they were recommending me to do and stuff like that.
What's that regarding?
Regarding me going over there and going to get help, going to a hospital or something like that.
Okay. Is this something you discussed with your family in the past?
Yeah, it was mainly over depression and stuff like that. It was never anything to this severity. Never, yeah.
Are you taking any medication at all? You never got to that point.
Never got to that point.
Okay. All right. But so up to this point, you've been able to understand any conversations you've had with any other officers or any other individuals you come across?
Yeah.
You're understanding our conversation so far with no problem?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
If you're giving Devon any benefit of the doubt here, you might say he has a self-awareness about his own psychological challenges.
I'm very, very concerned that when I go to the next place, I'd much rather, if I can, go to a hospital or immediately see the doctors when I go to the jail.
If you're the more skeptical sort, you might think Devon is setting up some kind of mental fitness defense. Devon actually talks about this a good bit. He talked about it in the interrogation room, and he even talks about it during a conversation with detectives in a holding cell at Tampa Police Headquarters.
So I got thinking, and I wonder if I'm actually crazy.
Why do you say that?
I don't know. I think that I lack the human ability to have empathy like other people. I truly believe the reasonings, the beliefs that I have and stuff like that are grounded with reality, but overall, I don't know. I just don't think I'm healthy. Something's not hardwired correctly. I don't really care either way. What are the odds of me just telling the place, look, my brain is not right. I can't really function well. Can I just get Baker acted or something like that?
The Baker Act is a Florida law that allows for someone to be held involuntarily for a mental health evaluation.
So when I get there, I need to tell doctors, look, I don't feel like I'm capable of like human empathy like other people. I don't really feel like the same person I was 24 hours ago.
You're not the same person you were 24 hours ago.
It feels like everything that I've ever experienced before now is just kind of redundant, a waste of time.
Devon gets that visit with doctors. And in February of 2018, nearly a year after the murders, he is deemed incompetent to proceed with trial and begins a stay at the Florida State Hospital. And this is where Devon's behavior becomes a little more bizarre.
Devon Arthurs' appearance in court was anything but ordinary. Everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, got a first-hand look at Arthurs appearing to choke himself to the point of unconsciousness.
Devon started to display very agitated behavior.
That's journalist Ali Winston. You've heard him in our last few episodes, and he's covered far-right extremism and the Devon Arthurs case for years.
Couldn't follow commands, drew his hair long, stopped bathing, started to pull faces in court, the sort of which you associate with somebody who has Tourette's syndrome or something like that. Not to denigrate that, it's just like he was like, it's kind of the sort of involuntary spasm that you associate with that particular condition.
We are obviously not doctors, nor is Ali Winston. But there doesn't appear to be any of that kind of behavior during Devon's initial visit with police.
And I've watched that tape quite a few times. He does not come across as somebody who is, I mean, he's agitated, but he's speaking clearly. He is able to look the detective in the eyes. He's able to articulate his thoughts. He is able to outline a sequence of events that happened. So yeah, I mean, it's clear at that point in time that he has his wits about him.
Here's Dr. Michael Marr, a Florida psychiatrist, testifying at one of Devon's competency hearings about his behavior during one of Dr. Marr's evaluations.
He places his hands from the front around his neck. He squeezes and lets his head fall into his hands to compress his blood vessels until he begins to lose consciousness. At that moment, his hands involuntarily release. He becomes aware of his surroundings again and attends to the environment. During each interview, this occurred many times, approximately every 2 to 3 minutes. And I would characterize that as an obsessive, self-injurious behavior consistent with a psychotic thought disorder, which is related to an involuntary avoidance of pain and psychic distress which he experiences.
Describe why you use the word involuntary in describing what you observed.
It is clearly a product of his illness. It is not a rational thought pattern, for example, directed at avoiding criminal responsibility or criminal prosecution.
Dr. Marr says this behavior occurs every 2 to 3 minutes. And during a separate assessment with court-appointed psychiatrist Dr. Yolanda Leon, she says this behavior occurs as often as every 60 seconds.
He seems to be grabbing his neck now more frequently than he was when I saw him in May. In May, he was doing it roughly every 5 to 6 minutes. This Monday, he was doing it once a minute, roughly, once every minute to 2 minutes, about once every minute and a half, I think is what the calculation was.
For reference, in an hour-long interrogation video with police in 2017, it doesn't happen at all.
Do you believe he suffers from mental illness?
Yes.
And what is it that you believe he suffers from?
I would characterize the primary diagnosis as schizoaffective disorder. I would add that his case is a complex diagnostic case. There are various overlapping diagnoses, including schizophrenia, autism, bipolar disorder with psychosis.
In May of 2023, after all the psych evaluations, mental fitness hearings, and a full 6 years after the murders, Devon is going to trial. And his attorneys are preparing an insanity defense. But to keep a life sentence off the table, they wind up striking a deal with prosecutors. So Devon pleads guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and receives a sentence of 45 years in prison.
How old are you, Mr. Arthurs?
I'm 24 years old, sir.
Well, 45 years with a 25-year minimum mandatory, you're going to be an old man if you get out of prison. And that's followed by 15 years of probation, that if you violate even ever so slightly, you could go back to prison for the rest of your life. Do you realize that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There are a lot of forces, both internal and external, that play a role in people like Devon and his descent into those far-flung corners of the extreme far right. But as far as what all of this means, let's start at the very beginning of how radicalization actually works. Luke Baumgartner is a research fellow at George Washington University's program on extremism, and you heard him in our last episode.
So, broadly speaking, radicalization is the process by which somebody shifts their worldview or their ideology from what would be considered the norm or the standard in their social context. So, whatever culture it is that they're growing up in, and they move however many standard deviations away from the mean, right? If you take culture A, for example, and that is a culture that values participation in society, that values equal rights for all, that values treating everybody with respect, and you move further and further away from that center of what makes that culture what it is, that's what we would generally call a radicalization pathway.
The process of being radicalized is different for everyone, but there are some consistencies. Here's Hannah Gaze, journalist and researcher with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Both radicalization and de-radicalization are very personal processes that can't, I think it's kind of like hard to do any of that at scale. In the case of like someone like Arthurs, I think one thing that we definitely see with like a lot of these younger guys in the movement is that they're dealing with tough home lives. I mean, that can certainly have an impact on you. It can have an impact on anyone, like no matter how mentally well they're doing in general. Arthurs was clearly struggling with some mental health issues on top of his home life problems. I mean, all of these are kind of factors in terms of drawing someone to radicalization.
There is no one model that satisfies all instances of radicalization, and there is no satisfying answer to why people become radicalized. And that goes across the ideological spectrum. That can go from far left, far right, jihadist and Islamist, single issue, environmental, and it runs the gamut of every ideology that's out there that can lead to ostensibly what would be considered extreme. Radicalization typically does not happen in a vacuum, although it can, and we've seen that sort of happen recently in the last 5-6 years or so with the emergence of a lot more lone actors that commit acts of violence. But there needs to be some sort of external force that's acting upon that individual who's becoming more radicalized. And especially with the internet and virtually limitless access to information and other people, it's no longer really considered something that happens in a vacuum. So it's not like the 1980s or the 1970s where you could pick up a copy of the Turner Diaries and become radicalized just off of reading that, in the same way that Timothy McVeigh did or members of the Order did back in the 1980s. That's not something that happens anymore.
There are a lot of paths into it. The most influential force is probably what we rely on every minute of the day: the internet.
Nowadays, radicalization primarily happens online, and it's not so much where, it's the 90s where you're brought into this skinhead gang, roaming the streets looking for quote-unquote protection from violent minorities, which is, sort of a trope that skinhead gangs would use when they were at their heyday. And how fast people radicalize really just depends. So somebody could radicalize within a number of weeks. They could radicalize in months. They could have it over years.
I think a lot of the people that I've talked to who have fallen into this stuff, there's never really a single moment when someone's mind changes. Humans don't work that way. Like, you don't just wake up one day and decide that the earth is flat. I mean, there are people that believe that. Or you don't convert to a religion in one day. That's kind of a myth. Worldview changes take time.
99% of the time going to be young white men that find themselves in that position to where they feel disaffected. They feel as if something that is rightfully theirs, being at the top of a hierarchical race-based society, is being usurped by the elevation of minorities or other disaffected social groups that have been historically oppressed in the US, in Europe, wherever it might be. With the far right, yes, it is overwhelmingly young white men. There can be minorities in there. There are Hispanics, there are Jews, there are other people of color that end up becoming members of far-right groups or end up engrossed in a far-right ideology. But that's the exception, not the rule. The only constant that we've typically found in the literature and in studies is that they're typically young men. And that's about the only constant that we can find.
I think another kind of strong current, particularly with younger guys, is maybe the influence of kind of like an older, more authoritative figure being the one that introduces you to these ideas and kind of like pushes them forward. And I think that's certainly an aspect in this case.
One of the key components in that process of radicalization we've been talking about is being young and being impressionable. Those prime years are when social approval and questioning authority kind of means everything.
Anybody who's under the age of 18 can't be a federal informant, so they can't rat on you, they can't snitch on you, they can't be recruited by the police or the FBI and potentially ruin your operation or break up your group. So that's a practical consideration. The other angle is that obviously if your mental state and your decision-making process is not as fully developed as, let's say, 25 to 30-year-old, you are a lot more impulsive with your decision-making. So you'll be a lot more amenable to carrying out acts of violence, be a lot more amenable to extremist ideology and coaching from older members, and you are more likely to go along with the status quo within that group, and you're a lot more susceptible to groupthink. If everybody else in the group is saying that blacks and Jews are the sources of our problems as white men, and you're 16, 17 years old, you might end up believing that because everybody in your peer group is saying that. So then it must be true.
Grievance and blame. They are two very prominent parts of all of this. Because if you're going to be angry, then you need something to be angry about. And that means directing that anger somewhere specific.
They ultimately look for a scapegoat, and they look for somebody else to blame on their lack of success or their failures and their inability to live up to the expectations that American society has broadly set up for young white men in the American society more broadly. So if you don't have a wife, you don't have kids, you don't have this high-paying job that can pay all the bills, send you on vacation, get you 2 cars, and the white picket fence in the suburbs, then ultimately, whose fault is it? It's not yours, because that is rightfully given to you. At least that's what they say. By virtue of your skin color, you are guaranteed these things, these privileges, and these benefits.
There's another element to this that we haven't gotten into yet, and that is that as a teenager, there are few things that can be more important than the search and need for community, to belong to something. Here's journalist Ali Winston again. He's covered the extreme far-right, white supremacist beat for years.
Devon was he was desperate for community. That's my read on it. Devon was really desperate to find a place to fit in. He wanted to belong. He wanted to find connection to other people, especially of his age. And, like many young people whose lives revolve around online community, particularly the way that it exists now, a lot of that has to do, one way you get notoriety and attention online is you act like an edgelord. You engage in provocative, extreme behavior, and you draw people's attention through opprobrium, or you draw it through praise and imitation. And in the world that he fell into on Iron March, the more outrageous shit you say, the more attention you get, and the more of a badass you seem.
In stories like this, it's almost a cliche.
That's again a common trope amongst this generation, is that a lot of people would engage in these worlds to kind of engage in these games of adolescent one-upmanship, right? That's the same thing as somebody who slits someone's tires in a high school parking lot, or throws somebody into a pool when they're fully clothed or whatnot right before a swim test. it's the sort of thing that gets people talking about them. Oh, look at that guy. He's such a badass. Da, da, da.
This radicalization pathway, in some ways, explains Devon Arthurs' willingness to commit murders at just 18 years old. He leaves the Atomwaffen division, but he says the anger, the rage, the grievance, that has always been there. And to understand that radicalization pathway and all that it entails, we should probably speak to someone who's also gone down that road. Next time on Deviant. When did you first wade into the Atomwaffen division and what that group was and that community?
That wasn't until probably around 2019 that I actually was in contact with them and unknowingly, and then ended up joining them.
A former member of Atomwaffen division tells his story.
I was getting a little isolated around then and started talking to these people online more, and it kind of pushed me further and further right.
This episode of Deviant is written by me, Andrew Iden. Dan Simitovich is editor and producer, and Clark Goldman provides editorial support. Original scoring by Shuvo Sir. Sales, marketing, and distribution support comes from our partners at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.